Nathan Cole was 38 years old, and he had been preparing for fatherhood for 7 months. He drove a navy blue Expedition with a car seat in the back he had installed himself, checked the anchors on twice, and had the pediatrician's office address already entered into the navigation, not because he couldn't remember it, but because he liked having it there, the way he liked having everything in place before it was needed. He wore steel-toed boots on job sites and kept a folded photograph in his wallet, a sonogram 12 weeks, given to him by his wife Claudia at a dinner in October, that he had shown to exactly 4 people and thought about every day. He was a licensed civil engineer and a senior project manager at Hargrove Infrastructure Group, where he oversaw the design and construction sequencing for large-scale municipal projects. He had been at the firm for 9 years. He had never missed a deadline. He had been preparing for fatherhood for 7 months. He had read 3 books. He had built a crib from a flat-pack kit and then rebuilt it when he wasn't satisfied with a wobble in the right front leg. He had taken the car seat installation course at the fire station on a Saturday morning because the instructions alone did not satisfy him. He had been ready. On a Tuesday morning in May, Claudia told him over breakfast that she had miscarried. She was calm in a way he found, at the time, to be strength. He had held her. He had said the things that needed to be said. He had called his supervisor to explain he would be working from home that day. He had done all of this. And then, 3 weeks later, something made him request the medical records. What was in them required him to sit down. What was underneath them required something more than sitting. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The request for medical records had not come from suspicion. Exactly. It had come from the specific, persistent discomfort of a detail that did not fit. Nathan was an engineer. He assessed systems. He understood load paths and failure modes, and the difference between a structure that appeared sound and one that actually was. He had extended this discipline over 9 years to every complex project he managed, not because he was distrustful by nature, but because he had learned that the problems that destroy a project are almost always the ones that were visible early and not followed up on. The filed-away detail, the reading that didn't quite fit, the number that was close enough to pass but not exactly right. The detail that didn't fit was this. Claudia had described the miscarriage to him in clinical terms that were accurate and coherent, but that did not match, in a specific way he could not immediately name, what he had read in the second of the 3 books. The terms were right. The sequencing was wrong. He had sat with this for 3 weeks, without saying anything, building the observation into a column of unexplained data, the same column he maintained on every complex project. The one he returned to when enough had accumulated to warrant a closer look. After 3 weeks, he had looked. He had requested the prenatal records from the OB/GYN office where Claudia had been seen. He had framed it, to himself and in the request, as needing documentation for insurance purposes. This was partially true, and partially the cover a careful man constructs when he is not yet ready to name what he is looking for. The records arrived on a Thursday afternoon by secure portal. He opened them at his desk at home, with the door closed and the house quiet. He read them through once. Then, he read them through again. There had been no pregnancy. There had been no prenatal care. There had been no record at any point in the 7 months of Claudia being seen at this practice as an obstetric patient. She had been seen twice, both visits several years ago, neither related to pregnancy. He sat at the desk for a long time. He thought about the sonogram in his wallet. He thought about the dinner in October where she had set it in front of him, folded in half, and watched his face when he opened it. He thought about the car seat at the fire station. He thought about the crib he had rebuilt because the wobble in the right front leg had not satisfied him. He thought about what a man does with a detail this large when it arrives all at once. And he understood, with the particular precision of someone who had spent 9 years assessing what could go wrong before it went wrong, that this detail was not the beginning of the problem. It was the surface. The actual problem was underneath it. He opened a new document. He began to make a list. Nathan had spent 9 years at Hargrove Infrastructure Group building a reputation for one thing. He did not miss things. Not in the field, not in the office, not in a set of drawings, not in a vendor contract. He had caught a load calculation error on a bridge project in year 3 that had prevented a failure mode nobody else had seen coming. He had identified a sequencing conflict on a wastewater treatment project that would have cost the firm $4 million in remediation if the concrete had been poured on the original schedule. He was the person the principal engineers called when a project was too complex and too expensive to survive an error. He drove the expedition because it was practical, and he had maintained it correctly, and it was not yet worn out. He wore steel-toed boots because he spent real time on real job sites, and because a civil engineer who shows up at a construction site in dress shoes has announced something unflattering about his relationship to the actual work. He had met Claudia 4 years ago at a professional event. She worked in municipal project coordination, which meant they operated in adjacent professional worlds. A compatibility that had felt substantive at the beginning, and that he now understood had served a different purpose than he had recognized at the time. They had married 18 months later. He had been happy for most of the first 2 years. The 3rd year had developed a quality he had not fully interrogated, because the quality was subtle, and because he had been at the peak of a demanding project cycle, and because a man who is managing 4 concurrent municipal projects at once does not always have the bandwidth to. Also, manage the fine reading of his domestic situation. He had noticed things even so. A change in Claudia's financial behavior, more specific about which accounts were used for which things, in ways that had a precision that did not match her previously casual approach to money. Questions about his retirement contributions, their amounts, their vesting schedules, that had arrived with a particularity that had registered as odd at the time. A name he had seen on her phone screen once, appearing twice over 3 months in contexts that were slightly different each time, in a way that had the quality of something managed rather than incidental. He had filed all of it. He had not yet opened the file. The medical records had opened it. He spent 2 hours that Thursday night making the list. Not a list of what had happened. He was still assembling that. A list of what he needed to find out, in what order, and who he needed to call. He called the first person on the list the following morning. His name was Gerald Okafor. He was 54, a civil and financial litigation attorney with an office on the 9th floor of a building Nathan had walked past 100 times without ever having reason to enter. He had been referred by a colleague at the firm, not a close colleague, a peripheral one. Someone who had mentioned once that he knew a good attorney if you ever needed one. And Nathan had written the name in his notebook because Nathan wrote everything in his notebook. Gerald picked up at 7:30. Nathan described the situation in the sequential, factual manner he used in project briefings. What he knew, what he didn't know. The document that had clarified the shape of what he was looking at. He said the words out loud for the first time. There had been no pregnancy. Gerald was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The sonogram photograph she gave you. Do you still have it?" Nathan said, "Yes," Gerald said. "Don't discard it. Come in today if you can. Bring the wallet." He was there at noon. Gerald poured water and set a glass in front of him and sat down and said, "I'm going to ask you to do something before I say anything else. I want you to tell me everything you noticed over the past 2 years. Not about the pregnancy, about everything. The financial questions. The name on the phone. All of it. I want to hear it before I tell you what I'm thinking, because I want your account to be uncontaminated by my analysis. Nathan told him. He was organized and sequential, and he did not editorialize. He gave Gerald the observations the way he gave field readings: date, observation, context, what he had done with the information at the time. Gerald listened without writing anything down. When Nathan finished, Gerald said, "The retirement contribution questions. You said she asked about the vesting schedule." Nathan said, 3 separate occasions. The third time, she asked specifically about what happened to the vested balance in the event of a dissolution. Gerald said, "She asked that." Nathan said, "Approximately 14 months ago." Gerald looked at him. He said, "I want to bring in a forensic accountant before we proceed. A woman named Patricia. She's the best in the county for this kind of work. I also want to have the sonogram photograph analyzed by a document examiner I use. A fabricated sonogram is not difficult to produce, but a professional examiner can identify the specific markers of a fabrication." He paused. "There's a third thing I want to look at." Nathan said, "The name on the phone." Gerald said, "Tell me everything you remember about it." Nathan told him. The name had appeared twice, 3 months apart, on Claudia's phone screen while it was laying face up on the kitchen counter. A man's name. He had not recognized it. The first time, the notification had been a text. The second time, a missed call. He had not said anything either time. He had written the name in his notebook. He read it to Gerald. Gerald wrote it down. He said, "Give me 10 days. Don't say anything to Claudia. Don't change anything about your behavior at home. Don't access any financial accounts that aren't yours alone. And don't throw away the wallet." Nathan said, "I'll need you to explain the retirement question. The dissolution one." Gerald said, "I know. But let me show you what's in the wall before we talk about the wall." He looked at Nathan for a moment. Then he said, "You came to me because you found a medical record that didn't match a story you'd been told. You did this before you said a word to her, before you confronted anyone, before you did anything that could not be undone." He said it simply, the way a man confirms a structural reading. That's the right sequence. Hold it. He didn't move fast. He moved the way he moved through the early phase of a complex municipal project, with the site assessment complete before the design began, every load path mapped before a foundation was poured. He went to work. He managed his projects. He came home at his usual time. He ate dinner and watched the news and spoke to Claudia in the register of a man whose life has not changed. Because from her perspective, it had not. He was very good at this. 9 years of managing complex systems had made him fluent in the discipline of holding a great deal beneath a surface that did not show it. He had run projects through permit crises and contractor failures and material shortages without letting the crisis become visible to the client before he understood it completely. He applied the same discipline here. The surface was steady. Underneath it, everything was in motion. Gerald called on day 8. He said, "Come in tomorrow morning. Patricia is going to be here. Bring the notebook." Nathan was there at 8:00. Patricia was 53, small and precise, with a yellow legal pad she had already half-filled before he arrived. She did not waste time. She said, "I'm going to tell you what I found in the order of severity, from least to most. Ask questions at the end." The first finding, the joint household accounts had been drawn on systematically over 19 months, in amounts between $600 and $2,400, irregular in timing, routed to an external account in Claudia's name alone. Total, $26,800. The account had been opened 21 months ago, 3 months before the dinner in October, where the sonogram had been presented. Nathan wrote the number in his notebook. He wrote the date the account was opened. He underlined the date. Patricia continued. The second finding, Nathan's retirement account, the one Claudia had asked about 3 times, with increasing specificity, had a beneficiary designation on file. Nathan was aware of this. What he was not aware of was that the beneficiary designation had been updated 11 months ago. The original designation had been his mother. The updated designation listed Claudia as primary beneficiary at 100%. He looked at Patricia. He said, "I didn't update the designation." She said, "The update was processed through the online portal. The login credentials used were yours. The update was made on a Tuesday afternoon in March, between 2 and 2:30 p.m. He said, "I was on a site visit in the Eastern District on that Tuesday. I have the site log." She said, "I know. I pulled it." She set a document on the table. The IP address used to access the portal was your home address. You were not at home. The retirement account balance at the time of the unauthorized designation change, $318,000. Gerald set his pen down. Nathan looked at the number. He looked at the date on the account opened 21 months ago. He looked at the beneficiary change 11 months ago. He thought about the dinner in October, which was 18 months ago, where the sonogram had been set in front of him. He thought about the 7 months of preparation, the car seat, the crib he had rebuilt for the wobble. He thought about what the pregnancy had been for. The timeline was clear when he assembled it in order. The external account had been opened first, 3 months before the sonogram dinner, which meant the financial mechanism had been established before the pregnancy was announced. The retirement designation had been changed after the pregnancy was established, when he would have been least likely to review his financial accounts because his attention was organized around the arrival of a child. The beneficiary change required only a portal login and his credentials, which he had access to in the ordinary way of a spouse who manages shared household technology. The pregnancy had been the architecture of distraction. He stood over it the way he stood over a project's full set of drawings, not reading any single document, but looking at the whole system. Feeling where the load paths ran. Understanding not just what each piece was, but what the whole structure was designed to do. He said, "The designation change is fraud. Unauthorized access to a financial account using my credentials." Gerald said, "Yes," he said. "The fake pregnancy was the mechanism that made the fraud viable. It organized my attention away from my finances at the moment the designation was changed." Gerald said, "That is the argument we will make." Nathan said, "What is the third finding?" Patricia set a final document on the table. The name Nathan had seen on Claudia's phone, the one he had written in his notebook, twice, 3 months apart. Patricia had identified him. He was a financial planning consultant. He had been Claudia's professional contact for approximately 2 years. He had also, Patricia had found through public records, been named in a civil complaint 2 years prior, a complaint filed by another client, a woman, alleging that he had advised her to restructure her marital assets in ways that benefited a subsequent dissolution claim. The complaint had been settled. He had not lost his license. Nathan looked at the document. He looked at the name. He looked at the settlement record. He understood the full shape of it now. Every load path. Every connection. Every element of a structure that had been designed with patience and with external expertise before the dinner in October, before the folded sonogram, before the car seat at the fire station, before the crib he had rebuilt for the wobble in the right front leg. He said, "File." Gerald said, "There's one more step before we file." The sonogram. The document examiner's report had come back that morning. The sonogram photograph was a fabrication, a digital composite created from a template available in online communities that the examiner described, in the dry language of expert reports, as having been designed for the explicit purpose of simulating a prenatal ultrasound. The specific markers of fabrication were documented in the report. Pixel artifacts at the date stamp, metadata inconsistencies, a font used in the patient name field that had not been in clinical use at any hospital in the state for 4 years. Gerald set the report on the table between them. Nathan looked at it. He looked at his wallet, which was on the table because Gerald had asked him to bring it. He took the photograph out of the wallet. He looked at it for a moment. The grainy ultrasound image, 12 weeks, his name in the patient information field in a font that had not been in clinical use for 4 years. He set it on the table. He did not pick it up again. He said, "File." The petition was filed on a Monday morning. It was, Gerald had told him, one of the most precisely documented cases he had assembled in 22 years of practice. The fraudulent beneficiary designation, the unauthorized portal access, timestamped against a documented site log that placed Nathan 38 minutes from his home. The $26,800 in systematic household account transfers. The fabricated sonogram, certified as such by a qualified document examiner. The financial consultant's name, his prior settlement record, and his documented relationship with Claudia, establishing that the dissolution strategy had been developed with outside professional assistance. The criminal referral for identity theft, using Nathan's login credentials without authorization to alter a financial instrument, went to the county prosecutor's office the same morning. Claudia was served on a Wednesday afternoon. Nathan was at a site meeting. He learned about it from Gerald's text at 4:30, between agenda items. He read the text. He replied, acknowledged. He went back to the meeting. Her attorney, a woman named Holm, who had an established practice in high-asset dissolution, called Gerald the following morning. The call lasted 9 minutes. Her opening position, Gerald reported, had been notably less aggressive than her reputation suggested. She had asked about the criminal referral. Gerald had confirmed it was active. She had asked whether cooperation on the civil matter would affect the referral. Gerald had said that was a question for the prosecutor's office. She called back the following week with a settlement proposal. It was structured around the financial claims, the $26,800 in transfers, the retirement designation reversal, the marital asset division, and made no mention of the fabricated pregnancy, which was not a civil claim but which was part of the court record, and which her client clearly did not want discussed in open proceedings. Gerald countered on every point. The negotiation took 3 weeks. The final agreement, the retirement beneficiary designation reversed to Nathan's mother, effective immediately. The $26,800 in documented transfers credited entirely to Nathan from Claudia's share of the marital assets. The marital home, joint title, equity of $248,000 split equally after the transfer credit, leaving Claudia's net share at $97,200. No spousal support, given Claudia's independent income and the documented financial misconduct. The prosecutor's office declined to pursue criminal charges, citing evidentiary complexity, but the file remained open. Gerald told Nathan this was not unusual and was not an exoneration. He said the civil record, the expert report on the sonogram, and the IP documentation were all part of the public court record and would remain so. Nathan said, "Is there anything else?" Gerald said, "The financial consultant. His name is in the public record of this proceeding. His prior settlement is also public. I expect that combination will be of interest to his licensing board." Nathan said, "I expect so." He did not file the licensing board complaint himself. He had confirmed with Gerald that the information was in the public record and therefore available. What happened with it was not his concern. He had done what he needed to do, correctly, in the right order, and the public record would do the rest. The dissolution was final 4 months after the petition. It did not happen all at once. The retirement account was restored to its original beneficiary within 30 days of the final agreement. Nathan reviewed every financial account and instrument he held, personally with his accountant, over 2 sessions. He updated his passwords. He established a monitoring service. He did these things not from fear, but from the recognition that a careful man performs maintenance on the systems he depends on, and that he had allowed a period of inattention whose cost he now understood precisely. Claudia moved to an apartment in the Western District. Nathan did not know much about her life after the dissolution and did not seek to know. She had made the choices she had made, and she was living in them, and that was the correct proportion of the consequence. Hargrove Infrastructure Group named Nathan a principal engineer in the spring, a position that had been under discussion for 2 years and that the firm's managing director described, at the announcement lunch, as long overdue. Nathan said he appreciated the timing. The managing director asked why the timing specifically. Nathan said he was better positioned to lead something now than he had been 2 years ago, and let that be the whole of the explanation. He answered every call the same day. He kept the notebook in his jacket pocket. He started a new one in January and wrote the date on the cover and put it in his pocket and went back to work. On a Saturday morning in early April, Nathan Cole sat at the kitchen table of a new apartment, east-facing, enough light in the mornings to see the coffee steam, with a cup of coffee and a set of plans rolled out in front of him. Not work plans, personal ones. He had been thinking about buying a house. He had found 3 possibilities. He was assessing them the way he assessed every project, methodically, against a list of criteria, without rushing the analysis toward a conclusion he hadn't earned yet. He thought about the car seat in the Expedition, which he had removed. He thought about the crib, which he had disassembled and given to a colleague who had a child arriving in June, because the crib had been built correctly and had no wobble in any of its legs and had a great deal of use left in it. He thought about the sonogram photograph on Gerald's conference table. He thought about what it had taken to fold it and carry it, and think about it every day for 7 months, while something underneath it had been quietly, patiently, organized against him. He thought about what the photograph had actually been, not a document of a life beginning, but a document of a system, designed to direct his attention precisely away from where it needed to be. He thought about the engineer's instinct that had made him request the medical records, not from certainty, but from the persistent discomfort of a detail that did not fit. He thought about what would have happened if he had not followed that instinct, if he had grieved the loss and moved forward and never looked at the wall. He thought about what was in the wall. He picked up his pencil. He made a note on the margin of the plans. A question about the foundation depth on the third option, something to verify, something to follow up on before he drew any conclusions. He was not ready to conclude yet. He was still assessing. He went inside and turned out the light. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.